The town of Walnut Grove and the Ingalls family have warmed our hearts for nearly 50 years. But have you ever wondered what lay behind those innocent on-screen smiles, the gritty, real-life struggles that no script could fully capture? Today, Golden Rewind Classics invites you to uncover the untold final chapters in the lives of the Little House on the Prairie cast, from young Laura and the price of early fame to Albert's extraordinary resilience in his quiet battle with autism and the tragic final act of an Oscar-nominated legend. And of course, we must honor the enduring legacy of PRAIRIE himself, Michael Landon. Let's begin. Melissa Gilbert, Laura Ingalls. For millions of viewers around the world, Melissa Gilbert will forever be Laura Ingalls, the fearless little girl whose curiosity, determination, and warm heart became the soul of Little House on the Prairie. Every week, audiences watched her run barefoot through Walnut Grove, believing that the happiness they saw on screen reflected the life she lived once the cameras stopped rolling. But growing up as one of America's most recognizable child stars came with a price few viewers could see. While Laura always found comfort surrounded by family, Melissa spent much of her adult life searching for the same sense of peace beyond Hollywood. Over the years, Little House reunions have become some of the most meaningful moments of her career. Fans arrive carrying worn photographs, old DVD collections, and stories that have been treasured for decades. Those encounters remind Melissa that while childhood fame eventually faded, the character she brought to life never truly did. When Little House on the Prairie ended, Hollywood seemed ready to hand Melissa an even bigger career. She continued acting in television films, appeared on stage, voiced animated characters, and published a best-selling 2009 memoir, Prairie Tale. In 2001, she was elected president of the Screen Actors Guild, a position she held through 2005, representing thousands of performers across the entertainment industry during a period of major contract negotiations with the studios. From the outside, it looked as though everything had gone exactly as planned, but success didn't make life any easier. Growing up under constant public attention brought pressures that followed Melissa long after childhood ended. 3 marriages ended in divorce, including a widely publicized split from actor Bruce Boxleitner, and relentless media scrutiny and the expectation to remain forever recognizable slowly changed the way she viewed both fame and herself. Like many actors who began working as children, she spent years trying to meet Hollywood's impossible standards, believing that staying successful meant constantly reinventing the person audiences remembered. Over time, that pursuit became exhausting. Instead of chasing another leading role or trying to hold on to the image of the young Laura Ingalls, Melissa made a different choice. She stepped away from Hollywood's relentless pace, embraced natural aging, wrote candidly about her own regrets over cosmetic surgery, and focused on writing, family, and a quieter life with her husband. The decision surprised many longtime fans, but it also became the turning point that finally gave her something television fame never could: peace. Melissa Gilbert's story is no longer just about becoming one of television's most beloved child stars. It's about discovering that real happiness wasn't found under studio lights or in Hollywood success, but in finally letting go of the pressure to remain the little girl the world refused to forget. But Laura isn't the only child with an extraordinary story behind the scenes. Would you believe that her on-screen brother once battled an adversity that the medicine of the time was nearly powerless against before going on to become a renowned voice actor? Matthew Labourteau, Albert Ingalls. Among all the children who eventually became part of the Ingalls family, Albert may have experienced the greatest transformation. Introduced as a troubled orphan surviving on the streets before finding a home with Charles and Caroline, Albert quickly became one of the series' most beloved characters. What few viewers realized was that the young actor playing Albert had already lived a story every bit as extraordinary as the one unfolding on screen. Today, Matthew Labourteau lives a life very different from the one audiences imagined for Albert Ingalls. It's a rare kind of legacy, one career remembered by his face and another by his voice. Long before he joined Little House on the Prairie at age 11 in 1978, Matthew faced challenges that many doctors believed might shape the rest of his life. Diagnosed with autism as a young child, he struggled to communicate and didn't begin speaking until around age 5. At one point, specialists questioned how independently he would ever be able to function. But his adoptive family refused to accept those limitations, and through years of patience and encouragement, Matthew gradually found his voice, a breakthrough that eventually opened the door to acting. After Little House ended in 1983, Matthew continued acting through the 1980s, including a well-remembered turn in the 1986 horror film Deadly Friend. As childhood roles became harder to find, his distinctive voice led him into animation and video games, where he built a successful second career. He provided additional voices for Disney's Mulan in 1998, and from 2004 to 2008, he voiced the lead character, Jaden Yuki, across 180 episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh! X, meaning millions of people spent years hearing his performances without ever realizing they were listening to one of Little House's most beloved child stars. Unlike many former child actors whose personal lives became tabloid headlines, Matthew deliberately stayed out of the public eye. He rarely saw interviews, avoided celebrity culture, and focused almost entirely on his work and private life. While Matthew found quiet success through his voice, another figure rose to fame as television's ultimate mean girl. Yet the woman behind that villainous role possesses a completely contrasting soul. Alison Arngrim, Nellie Olson. For an entire generation of television viewers, Nellie Olson was the girl everyone loved to hate. Spoiled, selfish, dramatic, and always looking for trouble, she became one of the most unforgettable villains in television history. Children watching Little House on the Prairie often shouted at their television screens whenever Nellie appeared. Ironically, the actress playing her was almost nothing like the character. Today, Alison Arngrim is in her 60s, and while time has naturally changed her appearance, her bright smile and infectious sense of humor remain exactly as fans remember. People who meet Alison for the first time are often shocked by how warm, funny, and approachable she is, a far cry from the girl who made a generation shout at their television screens. For many longtime fans, meeting Alison in person remains one of the happiest surprises any Little House reunion can offer, because the woman they finally meet couldn't be more different from the girl they spent years loving to hate. That warmth wasn't something she developed later in life, it was there all along, hiding behind Nellie's sneer. On set, it showed up as her real-life friendship with Melissa Gilbert. Despite Laura and Nellie's constant on-screen feuding, the two actresses laughed together between takes and stayed close for decades. It was the same genuine personality that, once the show ended, pointed her toward an entirely different kind of career. Rather than keep chasing dramatic roles that traded on Nellie's meanness, Alison leaned into the very thing that made her likable in real life, her sense of humor, and built a second career as a stage performer, author, and public speaker. Comedy gave her a stage Nellie Olson never could. That same comfort with being open eventually carried her into far more difficult territory. In 2010, she published her memoir, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch: How I Survived Nellie Olson and Learned to Love Being Hated, and used it to reveal something she'd carried privately for years, a history of childhood sexual abuse. Rather than let that history define her in silence, Alison turned it into advocacy, speaking publicly to encourage other survivors to come forward, and lending her voice to HIV/AIDS awareness campaigns as well. The same honesty that made her memoir funny made its hardest chapters land even harder and gave other people permission to tell their own stories. That combination, the humor and the honesty, is what fans respond to now. Alison still hears some version of "I hated Nellie, but I love you" at nearly every convention, and she takes it as the highest compliment the job could offer, proof she disappeared so completely into a character that people forgot the two weren't the same person. Alison's courage inspired millions, yet an even more radiant story of perseverance belongs to another father figure of Walnut Grove, a man who spent 40 years living in the shadows of others before stepping into the light at the age of nearly 80. Richard Farnsworth, Jonathan Garvey. Among the hard-working fathers of Little House on the Prairie, Jonathan Garvey stood out as a man of quiet strength and unwavering integrity. Richard Farnsworth never relied on dramatic speeches or larger-than-life performances. A calm voice, an honest smile, and a reassuring presence were enough to make audiences believe he truly belonged in Walnut Grove. Yet by the time viewers first met him, Richard had already lived a Hollywood career far more remarkable than most leading actors could ever imagine. Today, Richard Farnsworth is remembered not only as Jonathan Garvey, but as one of Hollywood's greatest late-blooming success stories. Long before he ever stepped in front of the camera, Richard built a reputation as one of Hollywood's most respected stuntmen. For decades, he performed dangerous horseback falls, wagon crashes, and action sequences, reportedly appearing in stunt work in more than 300 films, including Gone with the Wind and Spartacus, during an era when safety equipment and computer-generated effects barely existed. Directors eventually recognized the authenticity he brought to every scene, opening the door to acting roles that slowly transformed his career. That unlikely transition became one of Hollywood's greatest late success stories. He earned his first Academy Award nomination for Comes a Horseman in 1978. His second came 2 decades later for David Lynch's The Straight Story at the age of 79, making him one of the oldest Best Actor nominees in Oscar history. After spending decades doubling for other people, he finally became the face audiences came to watch. But just as Richard finally received the recognition he had waited a lifetime to earn, his health began to fail. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer that had spread to his bones, and the chronic pain that followed gradually took away the independence he had valued throughout his life. In October 2000, at the age of 80, Richard died by suicide at his ranch in New Mexico, bringing an extraordinary Hollywood journey to a deeply tragic close. A heart-wrenching departure for a legend. And when speaking of life's quiet moments, one cannot fail to mention the kind-hearted general store owner, a man who chose to slip away as silently as his own unassuming nature. Richard Bull, Nels Oleson. If there was one person who always seemed to bring balance to the chaos of Walnut Grove, it was Nels Oleson. While Harriet filled the mercantile with loud arguments and endless schemes, Nels answered almost every situation with patience, quiet humor, and gentle wisdom. He became the kind of father and husband audiences wished existed in every family. Many viewers assumed an actor who played such a lovable character would naturally become one of television's biggest stars after Little House on the Prairie. Richard Bull, however, went the opposite direction almost entirely. Today, fans remember Richard not through frequent public appearances, but through the gentle shopkeeper who seemed to welcome everyone into Olson's mercantile each week. Younger viewers discovering the show through streaming are often surprised to learn how completely he stepped back from public life. Yet for longtime fans, hearing his voice or watching an old episode is enough to make it feel as though Nels Oleson never truly left Walnut Grove. When Little House ended in 1983, Hollywood continued offering Richard acting opportunities, and he accepted a handful of television and film roles. But unlike many performers eager to build on a successful series, he never seemed interested in chasing greater fame. The more recognition he received, the more he was drawn toward the peaceful, private life he had always valued. That decision shaped the rest of his life. Free from the pressure of celebrity, Richard devoted his time to the things that had always mattered most to him: his wife, actress Barbara Collentine, his love of history, aviation, reading, and the quiet routines that fame rarely allows. Friends often described him as thoughtful, humble, and remarkably intelligent, saying there was very little difference between Richard Bull and the kind, soft-spoken man audiences knew as Nels Oleson. Because he valued privacy so deeply, Richard appeared in public only occasionally, usually during Little House reunions. Each appearance felt like a small gift for longtime fans. Sadly, Richard Bull passed away on February 3, 2014, in Puyallup, Washington, at the age of 89, following complications from pneumonia. He may never have pursued the kind of celebrity many actors dream about, but he achieved something far rarer, creating a character remembered with genuine affection by generations of viewers. while Richard Bull quietly stepped aside. His eldest daughter, Mary Ingalls, made a life-altering decision just as her star was shining brightest. Melissa Sue Anderson, Mary Ingalls. For millions of Little House on the Prairie fans, Mary Ingalls represented quiet strength. While Laura often rushed headfirst into adventure, Mary faced life with patience, compassion, and remarkable maturity, including the loss of her eyesight in the show's fourth season, one of the series' most unforgettable storylines. Many viewers believed the young actress behind her was destined for an equally extraordinary Hollywood career. Melissa Sue Anderson had other plans. Today, Melissa Sue Anderson rarely appears in public, making every reunion especially meaningful for longtime fans. In an age when former television stars constantly share their lives online, Melissa's quiet absence has made those rare appearances feel even more special. After her character left the show in 1981, a season before the series itself ended, Melissa continued building what looked like a promising acting career, television dramas, films, and guest roles that demonstrated she was far more than a child actress. But as the years passed, Melissa found herself facing a choice that many actors never make: continue chasing a career in Hollywood or build the kind of private family life she had rarely experienced while growing up in front of cameras. That decision gradually changed the direction of her life. In the early 2000s, she relocated to Canada with her family and two young children, determined to raise them far from the relentless attention that had surrounded her own childhood. Her decision inevitably fueled years of speculation. Because Melissa rarely gave interviews or appeared in public, rumors spread that she had disappeared because of personal problems or professional disappointment. The reality was far simpler. She had quietly chosen the life she valued most. Although she rarely returns to the spotlight, Melissa occasionally reunites with her former castmates, much to the delight of longtime fans. Mary Ingalls chose privacy, but Laura's on-screen husband, Almanzo Wilder, chose a different way to live with the memories of Walnut Grove. Dean Butler, Almanzo Wilder. For countless Little House on the Prairie fans, Almanzo Wilder wasn't just Laura Ingalls' first love. He was the man who completed one of television's most cherished romances. Calm, dependable, and quietly confident, Almanzo became the character many viewers hoped Laura would spend the rest of her life with. His chemistry with Melissa Gilbert helped create some of the series' most memorable moments, leaving audiences convinced that Dean Butler was destined to enjoy a long career as one of television's leading men. But once Little House came to an end, his greatest success arrived in a way almost no one expected. Today, Dean Butler is still affectionately greeted as Manly, long before many fans remember his real name, a testament to how completely viewers embraced one of television's most enduring love stories more than 40 years later. Although he continued appearing in television series throughout the 1980s, the kind of leading roles many expected never truly materialized. Rather than spending years chasing the next breakthrough, Dean recognized that his career needed a new direction and gradually moved behind the camera, building a career as a producer, writer, and television executive. That shift gave him something acting alone often could not: stability and creative freedom, and the ability to remain part of the industry without constantly competing for roles. At the same time, Dean became one of the strongest guardians of Little House on the Prairie's legacy. Through documentaries, books, interviews, podcasts, and fan conventions, he has spent years preserving the memories of Walnut Grove and sharing behind-the-scenes stories with audiences who continue discovering the series decade after decade. Preserving heritage is a noble endeavor, but for the mother Caroline Ingalls, the greatest legacy was the resilience to overcome the dark moments of her own life. Karen Grassler, Caroline Ingalls. To millions of viewers, Caroline Ingalls wasn't simply a television mother. She was the quiet strength that held the Ingalls family together through every hardship. Whether comforting Laura after a difficult day or standing beside Charles during life's darkest moments, Karen Grassel created a character who came to represent warmth, resilience, and unconditional love for generations of families. Many viewers naturally assumed the actress behind such an unforgettable role would go on to enjoy one of Hollywood's brightest careers. Reality took a different turn. Today, Karen Grassel is in her 80s, but to millions of viewers, she remains television's most beloved pioneer mother. At reunions, fans rarely begin by talking about Hollywood or awards. Instead, they tell her how Caroline Ingalls reminded them of their own mothers or inspired them to become better parents themselves. When Little House on the Prairie became one of television's biggest successes, Karen expected what many actors naturally hope for, a chance to build on that momentum. But the opportunities never arrived the way she imagined. Although audiences adored Caroline Ingalls, Hollywood struggled to see Karen as anyone else. The very role that made her famous also became the one that quietly limited the career many believed she deserved. As leading roles became increasingly rare, Karen returned to the stage, accepted smaller film and television projects, and gradually found herself working far from the spotlight she had once shared every week with millions of viewers. Professionally, it was a difficult adjustment. Personally, it became even harder. The disappointment of watching her career stall contributed to painful years marked by alcohol abuse and emotional struggles, which she later discussed with remarkable honesty in interviews and in her own writing. Rather than hiding those chapters, Karen eventually chose to speak openly about them, hoping others facing similar battles would realize recovery was possible. That honesty became another turning point in her life. Writing about her experiences allowed Karen to reclaim a story that Hollywood had never fully appreciated. Over time, theater, writing, and reconnecting with family helped her rebuild the sense of purpose that fame alone had never been able to provide. Karen's resurgence is a testament to inner strength. And finally, we come to the two men who shaped the soul of the film, kindred spirits and brothers, both on screen and off. Victor French, Isaiah Edwards. Few characters brought as much warmth, humor, and loyalty to Little House on the Prairie as Isaiah Edwards. With his rugged appearance, booming laugh, and enormous heart, Victor French created the kind of friend every family wished they had living next door. That authenticity wasn't accidental. Much of what audiences loved about Isaiah reflected the man who portrayed him. Today, Victor French remains frozen in the memories of fans exactly as they first knew Isaiah Edwards. Because his life ended far too soon, audiences never watched him grow old alongside the rest of the cast. Long before Little House on the Prairie, Victor and Michael Landon had already formed a close friendship while working together on Bonanza. When Michael began creating Little House, bringing Victor into the cast was one of the easiest decisions he made. Their natural chemistry wasn't the result of clever writing. It grew from years of genuine friendship and mutual trust. At the height of the show's popularity, Victor temporarily left Little House to star in his own sitcom, Carter Country, 1977 to 1979. It was a rare opportunity to lead a series of his own, and many fans wondered whether Isaiah Edwards would ever return to Walnut Grove. But when Carter Country ended, Michael Landon welcomed his longtime friend back without hesitation. Away from the spotlight, Victor earned a reputation as one of Hollywood's most genuine and dependable actors. In 1989, Victor was diagnosed with lung cancer. Despite treatment, his condition deteriorated quickly and he passed away on June 15th at just 54 years old. His death devastated Michael Landon, who later admitted losing Victor felt like losing a brother. The pain of losing a close friend seemed to foreshadow a cruel fate for Michael Landon himself, the father figure to the entire Ingalls family. Michael Landon, Charles Ingalls. For millions of families around the world, Michael Landon wasn't simply the star of Little House on the Prairie. He was the heart that gave Walnut Grove its warmth. Every week, as Charles Ingalls, he reminded viewers that kindness could overcome hardship, that family mattered more than fortune, and that even life's darkest moments could end with hope. Today, Michael Landon belongs to two generations at once. Those who grew up watching him as Charles Ingalls now introduce Little House on the Prairie to their own children and grandchildren. Long before Little House became a television classic, Michael had already spent 14 years as a star of Bonanza, Most actors would have been content simply starring in another hit series. Michael wanted something more, a show built not around gunfights or spectacle, but around ordinary families facing ordinary struggles with honesty, compassion, and hope. That vision became Little House on the Prairie, and it ran for 9 seasons, from 1974 to 1983. Michael wasn't only the leading actor, he wrote scripts, directed dozens of episodes, and served as executive producer for the entire run. That responsibility also shaped the atmosphere behind the scenes. Cast members often describe Michael as far more than a producer or director. For many of the young actors, he became a mentor and father figure whose guidance continued long after filming ended. Melissa Gilbert has often spoken about how deeply he influenced both her career and her life, while his decades-long friendship with Victor French reflected the loyalty that defined so many of his relationships. Then, in April 1991, everything changed. After experiencing severe abdominal pain, Michael was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, one of the deadliest forms of the disease. He went public with the diagnosis almost immediately, giving candid interviews rather than retreating from view. Even as his health declined, he continued working when he could and focusing on the people he loved. On July 1st, 1991, just 3 months after his diagnosis, Michael Landon passed away at 54 years old. News bulletins interrupted regular programming, and newspapers across America paid tribute. More than 30 years later, Michael's greatest legacy still isn't measured by awards, ratings, or the number of hit series he created. It lives on every time a new generation discovers Little House on the Prairie and finds comfort in the values he believed television should never stop celebrating. Nearly 50 years after the Ingalls family first welcomed viewers into Walnut Grove, their stories continue to remind us that while time changes every face, the memories created by great people never truly fade. Which cast member's journey surprised you the most? Was it Melissa Gilbert, Alison Arngrim, Michael Landon, or someone else? We'd love to hear your memories in the comments below. And if Little House on the Prairie was part of your childhood, don't forget to subscribe. Here at Golden Rewind, we continue celebrating the unforgettable stars and timeless stories that shape generations. Until next time, thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these memories alive.